Welcome back to the Becoming More podcast, episode number 13. Before we get started, I want to ask you to like and subscribe on YouTube and rate or review on Apple or Spotify. Here in Becoming More, we go in depth talking to some amazing people about how they have changed their lives dramatically and have inspired others to do the same. Today, I am joined by Daryl Perry. Daryl, it's nice to have you on the show. How are you today?
I'm doing well, Brett. Thanks for having me.
Great. Really glad to have you on. And as we start the show, I like to ask every guest what's the bottom line of their journey so far since they started changing their lives, and what would be yours?
So mine from the fitness standpoint, which trickles into everything else, is just consistency. And I working out consistently. I've been going probably at least 4 times a week since I was a teenager. So going back to 1999. And not all these workouts are dramatic, and there are times that I take weeks off. There's probably been times in there where I've taken a month off for whatever reason. But if you look at stuff over the course of time, if you're consistent with stuff, then as time plays out, you tend to get better results than you could possibly imagine. So consistency is everything.
I agree 100% because that's what I found in my journey so far as well.
Awesome.
So I like to kind of go back with everyone and try and find out like your background growing up, if you had like a weight issues, or if anything else that you had throughout as you were getting to become an adult that led to any things that you realized you had to change.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, growing up, I didn't realize I had any kind of weight problem until I was 8 years old. I was in 3rd grade. And you and I are roughly the same age. I think I might be a year older than you, but it was weird because in elementary school, they would weigh us like with our class.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And I remember, this was back in the late 80s, and I would wear the Bugle Boy Husky clothes. I don't know if you remember those, but so I got on the scale, and she, the nurse yelled back and she said 80 pounds. Every other child was like 40, 50. And I just remember this audible gasp. And that was the first time I remember hearing that. And then I was like, oh, there might be, maybe there's something here. But yeah, before that, I did always enjoy food. Growing up, my dad worked different like rotating shifts. My mom would, she was either with me a lot of times at home because I was born with cerebral palsy. So there was a lot of doctor's appointments and physical therapy and stuff like that. So she was either with me or she was, working part-time at nights. And she also, in my childhood, went back to school as well. So we would eat whatever. I mean, I remember we would have fast food on a fairly regular basis. We would have like Hamburger Helper and stuff like that on a pretty regular basis. But as I got older, I started to get a little bit more reserved and shy. Just because I was very self-conscious with just kind of my situation with the CP and such. And like, I would turn to food for comfort. Now, and that was like, by the time I was a teenager, that was, playing a lot more video games, eating like pizza rolls and bagel bites and stuff like that. And what I would typically do is I was active and I played sports, but like, I would alternate between sports and eating and, playing video games and stuff. So I again, really didn't have, and this just suited me. Like, for the stuff that I liked doing as a kid, this was fine. And then when I was a teenager and I was actually a freshman in high school, I was at I don't remember if it was an orthopedic appointment or a physical therapy appointment, but I got on the scale. And at that point, because I'm only like 5'7". I remember, again, this is the only time that my weight really, I remembered it. I was 209, which I know in the weight loss community, when we have folks that have lost hundreds and hundreds of pounds, that number in itself, it's like, oh, okay, 209, whatever. But I remember that was like different than what I probably thought I should have been at my age. So again, these are like 2 points where I really just weight kind of became a thing. Now, fortunately, I had one of the doctor I was actually working with around this time really wanted me to use exercise as kind of like almost like a rehab or a physical therapy type thing.
Mhm.
So he put me on a strength training program, really kind of nurtured me along with it. There was no expectation of like, losing weight or even getting to a certain amount of strength. He just wanted me to enjoy the activity. And because of that, I started to do this while I was still in high school. And again, that was kind of like with what I led with. By the time I was a junior in high school, like I was working out consistently. Now, also at that time, I began looking into like the men's fitness magazines and men's health and stuff like that. So I actually had lost any kind of extra weight that I had by the time I was a senior in high school. But then I kind of started to have these, nothing was ever good enough. So it was either I lost the weight. Well, maybe if I bulk up a little bit, because that's what the magazines were telling me, or if I focused on trying to get a 6-pack or whatever, maybe that would make me feel better about myself. And I just I went on this on and off, just kind of yo-yoing with whatever diet I was on, whatever my body looked like, and however I felt, really up until the point that I was about 30 years old. And then around that time, I started really just like, I just kind of wondered, because I was doing one of the popular diets at the time, and there was all these rules on like what you could and couldn't eat. And I just remembered like, well, what would happen if I ate a sweet potato? Like I really wanted a sweet potato. And what happens if I want chocolate or if I want ice cream? And what I started doing was just like, I would eat fruits and vegetables. I would drink a lot of water. I get enough protein and all that. But like, what if I eat the other stuff? And like, what if I start letting go a lot of the guilt that's around food? Now, another thing that I've done throughout all of this, again, because of the interest that I had in health and fitness, is while I have a career outside of fitness, I was certified as a personal trainer back in 2011. I started doing some adaptive exercise classes for adults with disabilities. And then I started doing more group fitness and more one-on-one training. And then as kind of the industry went towards more of an online model, I started doing some online coaching. And that's kind of, in kind of like I guess kind of like what I like, who I am and what I'm about. My big thing is I just try to get a message again around, be consistent, try to build a better relationship with yourself. And a lot of this stuff, whether you're working on weight loss or whether you're working on fitness or whatever it is that you're doing, it all starts like in here. So it's all how you view yourself. And if you take care of that and you focus on your actions and you're consistent and you develop patience, things are all going to fall in line eventually.
Yeah, that's so true. And the other day I had recorded another podcast with someone, and I said, we were talking about like how I used to say that like the journey was 90% nutrition and 10% exercise. And I said, I kind of have modified it to being, it's 50% mental and then 40% nutrition and 10% exercise. Cause I feel like so much of it is just, it's all like, once you have the healthier mindset, you can get to where you need to with nutrition and exercise. Because even like for me, I had lost 100 pounds and I didn't have that mindset. I just stuck with the program that I was on and lost it. And then I was on it. I kind of maintained for a while before I lost more. Cause I was like, I can kind of maintain this weight. It wasn't something it wasn't even something I was trying to do. It just was what happened.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and the interesting thing, and you talk about, you can lose the weight either by just taking action sometimes, and it does sometimes just kind of happen. Or the other interesting thing is, regardless of if you have the mindset where you're focused on the things of being patient and consistent or not, we're all doing the same actions. We're all trying to do the workouts. We're all trying to drink the water. We're all trying to follow whatever the nutrition plan is. So you can look at it from the outside. If you're not really set up well on the inside, you start looking around, okay, this person's doing this person's doing that, and it's kind of hard to tell the difference. But if you're somebody that has kind of if you're looking at this as more of an inside out approach, you don't necessarily, we all fall in, I think, for the external validation, no matter what we're doing, health, fitness, or anything else. But like, it's not as much of a thing for you. Like if you're internally driven, you start to see this stuff for what it is, which is just really a series of actions that you're trying to show up and do. And you're doing the best that you can. You're not competing against anyone else. And ultimately, you can even look at this as you're really not even competing against yourself. You're setting yourself up to be successful, and you're more or less your own coach instead of your own competition. But yeah, the mindset is huge.
Yeah. And it's something that so I don't coach anyone like as a, like I just kind of started getting into it a little bit just with friends that I know, and because they see what I've done, and like we talk about it, and I just kind of because like they'll get discouraged after like how it is. They'll do like 2 weeks. They'll be able to do it for about 2 weeks, and then something will happen, and they'll get off track. I put in air quotes. And then when they get off track, they're like, oh, I need to start to, I need to start on Monday again. And I said, well, I said, you can start like tonight or tomorrow. Like, you don't have to wait till Monday. And then another thing is, like just make, like, to me, it's always like small incremental changes, because you don't have to go from eating pizza and getting McDonald's for breakfast to eating a kale salad for lunch and grilled chicken and broccoli for dinner. Like, you can make smaller changes that will get you to that end point, but you don't need to do it so drastically that it's not sustainable, right?
Yeah. I mean, well, and a couple of things. One, I think, you having the success that you've had to this point, and people see that and they see what you're doing. I think this is really what the fitness industry is going to turn into. It's going to be less about, there's always going to be athletes and people that have been fit for the majority of their life are always going to have a place. If you're an athlete, you can do sport specific training. If you're there's always going to be a room, but I think you're going to see more and more people, because this is what you see on social media, is you relate to somebody. Like, there's somebody that is in, your line of work that has a similar story, and they're further along in the process. And that's really, I think, what coaching is you have somebody else that's further along in the process. They've figured out a way on what works for them, but they're also able to communicate it in more of a general term, so the people that they're working with, or just their friends, can like figure stuff out. So no, I think I'm not surprised that people are coming to you, and I think it's awesome that you're helping them out. The other thing, when we're talking about incremental changes, I think when a lot of times when people think about changes, they think about what I have to take away. And I'm a huge fan of, and this is actually the company that puts together the online platform that I use for my coaching. They talk precision nutrition. They talk about addition over subtraction, meaning if you're eating pizza, if you're eating, I don't know, pick any number of foods that the traditional diets would say are quote unquote, I'll do the air quotes too, because in a podcast you have to do air quotes. It makes no sense. Yeah. But like, take any range of foods that you're eating, and instead of like taking them out, start adding fruits and vegetables, start adding more water, start adding more protein. Because what's going to happen if you're eating that stuff in addition to the other stuff, one, you're starting to get more nutrient dense foods, which is never a bad thing. And then secondly, over the course of time, that stuff that you would say, oh my gosh, I have to cut this out, it's going to kind of fall in line anyway. It doesn't mean that you have to completely cut out pizza, because I would hate to do that, or anything else. But it's again, kind of looking at things from a different perspective and saying, okay, instead of cutting everything out, what can I add here? What's going to be sustainable? What's something that I can manage? What's something that I can build upon? So,
yeah. And like, for me personally, not to be like all about me show, but like sustainability was a key when I started, because when I started, like I went with this thing, which I'm sure you heard on my first podcast, Slimming World, which was like Weight Watchers for UK. Yeah. But like it was, to me, they were sustainable because I could have like potatoes and rice and stuff like that, and not have like, that was I was like I need something with my meat other than vegetables, other than green vegetables. So that's what I started with, and like that was sustainable to me at the time. And like that's what I feel is so important, because sometimes people see like whatever take your fad diet of the year, right? Whether it's keto or paleo or Atkins from back 10 years ago, whatever it was, like sometimes like they can be sustainable to some people, but then to some people they seem like they're so radical compared to like what they're used to, right? And like that's when I saw something, I'm like, yeah, I should probably I need something, but I didn't know what I needed to do. And then like it was one of those Instagram things again. I saw some people on the Slimming World that had lost a ton of weight, and they looked like me before, well, not quite like me, but they looked similar to me and their befores. So it's like, if they could do that, I can do it, kind of thing. And then eventually just got me to the point when I saw a certain number on the scale where I tried it and it worked for a while. And like that was because I built sustainability out of it. Yeah. Because I was able to do it for a while. And like so often you just see people that start and then all of a sudden they go quiet because they can't keep it up, because like they'll start strong, and we all can start strong because we can all do something for a certain amount of time. And then after a few, I always say 2 weeks, but whatever it might be, like it just falls off because we're like, you get kind of bored and complacent and
Yeah.
you know what,
Yeah.
or you just like it's the holidays and you want to have all the stuff that you would normally have at the holidays, or
Yeah.
it's your birthday and then it's your like kids graduation or what, you know, you find the excuses or the reasons to have these other things, and then it falls off. So it's always interesting to me talking to people that do coaching, because you know, trying to guide people around those, because it's not like so often like people, I do it myself, or I don't give myself grace when I go air quote off plan, or you know, have too much of the stuff I shouldn't have. But then like I had to come back. So for me, I can come back and say, well, I've already lost well over 200 pounds. So
Yeah.
I see that difference. But for someone that's only lost like 25 pounds and then they're like, well, I need to lose another 50. And I just like gain 5 or whatever.
Yeah.
How do you like how would you say something to them to kind of make sure they give themselves grace?
So yeah, and whenever somebody comes on with me, and if you guys, anybody listening, if you're ever thinking of working with a coach or trainer, anything, really pay attention to their relationship with health and fitness, because when you interact with them, that's going to be what rubs off on you. And the biggest thing for me when it comes to this stuff is, you know, regardless of if I decide, like if I have my protein shake and my protein waffle that I usually have for breakfast after my morning workout, or if I have a couple slices of like deep dish pizza, like it was a food choice. It wasn't necessarily good or bad. It was a choice that I made, and I'm moving on to the next one, like guilt-free. And when you get to the point where you start looking at these choices as things that you shrug off either way, they're not good, they're not bad, they're just, you know, they are what they are, and you move forward, you know, you start to kind of change all this stuff. You also will realize that, you know, and I do want to touch on this because this is what it is when you get into it. This stuff is boring. It is not exciting. It is, it is very important, but I would see, like, and a lot of times, and depending on the situation, yes, you have to take control of this to take control of your health and to take control of your life. Absolutely. But I also think in a lot of situations, what you're really learning is how to structure your day-to-day life, how to be disciplined in things, and when to really rely on discipline, but also know when to like take a step back and have enough awareness to say, you know what, I need to take a break today, whether that break or this week or whatever, whether that break is from the eating plan, the exercise, or just the entire thing, or, you know, whatever else it is that you're doing. I'm going to like take a step out of health and fitness for a moment and talk about like what we're doing here, which is podcasting. You know, when I started my podcast, I got in my head about it. It was an idea that I had this structure that I wanted. I was like, I'm going to do an almost daily format. And I did one episode, and then like, I didn't do anything for 6 weeks because I got in my head. And then my whole thing was, I'm just going to start doing this. Like, I'm just going to put an episode out. I don't care if it's 3 minutes long. I don't care if it's 10, 20, whatever. And what eventually happened, I wasn't perfect on that month. I think I did like 27, 28 days in a row, but I kept putting, like, I just kept putting episodes out. And then what happens, because, you know, you start to kind of get into this flow and you're like, well, I do the daily podcast. But then you realize, like, instead of something that I necessarily have to do, if the time isn't right for me to do this, because I've taken breaks, especially over like the last, you know, probably 6-8 months or so. You know, I trust that this is a skill that I can slide right back into. Mm-hmm. And I think you get into that with health and fitness as well. And I think that for anybody that's listening, that's still like really trying to lose weight right now, it's kind of hard to see that because you're trying to lose weight in the moment. You've probably been trying to lose weight for years, if not decades. So for somebody to tell you, hey, you know, this will fall in line, and oh, by the way, it's not going to be the most important thing of your day to day right now. It definitely most certainly is. But, you know, one thing that I can say, and this is anybody that kind of gets into their head about this and they're discouraged, is just keep trying to figure it out and be consistent. And consistent is not perfect. Consistent might be, but get really specific about what consistency looks like. So for you, it might be 2 to 3 workouts a week, you know, but get really specific, because also if we're thinking about this, if we're thinking, oh my gosh, well, how am I doing right now? I'm struggling. I'm doing bad. We're not specific about it, though. We always think we should be doing better. Mm-hmm. So, you know, what I'll tell somebody if they're discouraged is, let's focus on what you're doing right, and let's see what that next step is. Now, but in general, because what I'll tell, I mean, the nice thing about putting this stuff out on social media and having the podcast is there really isn't much mystery when people come on with me. Like they kind of know what they're getting, but that's my main thing is I'm hoping that they can build a solid foundation and be consistent and develop habits so that they can really, make health and fitness part of their life, and then start finding other things outside of that they have interest in, that they can take a lot of these skills and habits and routines and, apply something similar there.
Yeah, and when you mentioned getting in your own head about your podcast, I'll tell you, this is a behind the scenes because it's only May 28th, so the first episode dropped yesterday.
Yes.
And I was in my head about that first episode.
Yep.
I had it recorded about a month prior to releasing it, and I had I was like really, I didn't know if I turned it out well because I didn't listen to it. I knew what I said, and I knew I didn't have to edit because the sound sounded good.
Yeah.
And so I was thinking about maybe toying with like switching it and having someone ask me questions instead of me just talking one solo. And then I sent it to a couple of friends, and they said they liked it, they thought it was good. And then so I was like, all right, so I just released it. And then like the amount of response I got was not what I expected, right? And that's why I'm like, yeah, sometimes you got to not be in your head and just go with it because it can work out better than what you expect.
And it does. It's always much better than you think. And that's the thing. You'll have an idea on how you want to do something, and then and for podcasting, you'll have an idea on a format, and then you'll start messing with it, and you'll start asking other people's opinion. And what you'll find out is if you would just try, if you try the first format, just get a few episodes out. If you don't like it, try another format. I mean, you can then mix formats. 1 on some episodes, formats 2 on the other. There aren't any rules. And I think, that's something, again, this is where there's parallels between weight loss and everything else. You feel like you once you find a structure that's really defined, that's going to be the only thing that you ever do. And, podcasting, I think, is it's a form of expression. I mean, this is, it's basically, it's storytelling, and it's you telling the story the way that you do it. Now, podcasts as a whole, my gosh, they've been around for probably 12 or 15 years.
Oh yeah.
The podcasts that we all listened to were, back in the day when you used to have a lot of production and know-how behind it. These are people that were on radio because those are the only people that really knew how to do any of this stuff. So most of your early podcasts sounded like radio shows. So then all of us hear it and we're like, oh my gosh, that's what I have to do. But here we are in 2021. You and I are recording this on a Zoom call, which is how I record all my podcasts. And I have an account with Anchor. So for my solo ones, I literally just record them on my phone and upload them. But I mean, I think once you get your foundation down and your structure, you can really have a lot of freedom and flexibility with anything you're doing. And podcasting, I think, is a huge is a major example of that.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I actually had a podcast like 8 years ago, which was on movies. And I have to say that they were a lot harder to produce then. It was a lot. Now it's a lot more. You go through one distribution avenue, and they have all the nice links, so you submit everything easily. Instead of how it used to be, where it would take like almost a month to get Apple to add podcasts to their directory. And so it was a lot harder back then, and there wasn't Zoom, which made it easy for recording, where I used to have like multiple programs running so I could record Skype calls. And
Skype. What happened to Skype? Do you ever I'm sure it's still
it exists. I mean, we use it at my job. We have Skype for Business, but it's not like it was, right? Microsoft bought it and ruined it.
That's pretty much, well, and it's interesting because 10 or 12 years ago, I mean, it became a verb, Skype me. And then here we are, and we have everything that's gone on with 2020 and 2021 with a lot of people working from home, doing a lot of stuff on video conference, and hardly, you're the first person that I've heard that's actually still using Skype. So it's just kind of interesting how things change fast, man. They really do.
Yeah, I know. It is amazing. And Zoom came around right at the right time, right?
Oh my gosh, totally. Absolutely.
All right. So couple other questions I was curious because I know earlier you mentioned that you had CP. And I was just curious because, a lot of people might not know what that means.
Sure.
I was wondering if you could just like explain it a little bit and like what your daily, what was like for you on a daily basis with.
Yeah. So CP or cerebral palsy basically is a blanket term for any injury that's caused by lack of oxygen around birth. So for me, I was born 3 months premature. Now, if I want to get like drive the point home on like how fortunate I am just to like, be able to do the things that I do. My parents had a child that was born before me, a year before me, same circumstance, and lived 3 days and passed away. I'm here. Wow. And and the interesting thing, because this literally can affect anything. It can impact speech. It can impact all of your motor movements. And the thing is when you see me up and moving around, I am visibly disabled. And there's a lot of muscle tightness, a lot of as I've gotten older, I really have to work on my flexibility work, because otherwise like there's a lot of like of joint pain as well. But what it has allowed me to do is adapt a lot of things from an exercise standpoint. And again, I've been doing between physical therapy, which I started when I was super young, and the workouts that I told you when I started when I was a teenager, maybe a little bit before, like I've been around this stuff for a while. Now, where this got really interesting for me is that the one part of my body that isn't really affected by this. So like my entire left side and then my right side from the waist down is pretty much as affected, but like from my right upper torso is not affected. So, I can hold my phone and do all my stuff for Instagram. You wouldn't necessarily know. I can sit here like we're talking right now. And this has kind of been an interesting thing for me, because at any point in my life, whenever I would walk into a room, people would notice this. And it was always the first thing. So that was kind of a thing that when I first started doing stuff on the internet, like it was nice, because it was for the first time in my life, people were seeing me as the person first and like hearing my thoughts, my ideas, and my opinions first. And, so for a while I kind of I would talk about CP every so often, but not so much. And then I just like, I started to get, I had, a couple friends were really encouraged, I did put some stuff out on it, and they're like, you need to share more of this. And what I was finding out was that there was a lot of deep-seated emotion around this stuff. And as I started talking about it, like that emotion would come out. So, CP has been, it's given me kind of a different perspective on things. I do, and I mean, I have like anybody else in life, I have stuff that I deal with, that I struggle with, but it does give me a really good perspective on things. And, the whole thing with social media, and there's two sides of it, right? Like it's easy to get sucked into the stuff, but I mean, between the stuff that I do with Your Level Fitness and my job, we actually do a lot of stuff with social media and these content creators. There's a lot of good that's come out of this stuff for me as well. So
yeah, definitely. And it's kind of interesting because like sometimes I talk about it, in my real job too. I talk about like my Instagram stuff every now and then at work, and I'll be like, and I mentioned like, oh yeah, I've like a decent following, like 4,000 plus followers and all that.
Yeah.
And like, because I've lost like all this weight, and they're at first they're like, you have like somebody's like, you have thousands of people that follow you. I'm like, yeah, because they and
yeah.
And like some of my friends rag on me because they're like, oh, Mr. Influencer over here.
Well, I will. Yeah. Well, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Because I've got some stuff on this too.
Yeah. But then I'm like, I'm it's always one of those weird things, because it's just we're friends and we bust balls, and I was like, as you can bust my balls all you want, but I do see the people like that tell me every day that like I help them, so I'm fine with it.
Yeah. I mean, and so that's the thing with podcasting and social media. When you start getting those messages and people are saying, you've helped me with this, that kind of, I mean, that reinforces why you do it, right? Like that reinforces why with the baby on the way, you're, putting together all these podcast episodes so you can get this stuff out on a consistent basis. Like it really, it just puts more meaning behind the work that you're doing, or just sharing what it is that you do day to day. I will say, like, it was funny for me locally. I was in the grocery store once, and this this lady stops me. She's like, Daryl, your level fitness, like, called me by my Instagram handle. And it was so funny because, like, I've since become I've since become friends with, this is Amber Deets Diaries on Instagram. And you know, so she, like, that was funny. And I remember seeing, like, at the time I was like, man, I wish that my, you know, like, that my son was here to see this, because, you know, like, his dad is getting called out by his Instagram handle. And then when we were adopting our puppy, they wrote on there, I saw the paperwork, and it said that they didn't need to do the background check. They said it's the YLF guy, and I'm like, there you go. So that's my brush on that. But
that's awesome.
Yeah, but see, like, think about this when we talk about followers. So, like, you have 4,000 people that follow you. I have 3,000 people that follow me. In real life, think about that. Yeah. Like, think about, like, if anybody is actually interested in what any of us have to say, and then also think about it, because I know we see, like, all the you know, the celebrities, and I mean, we're talking wrestling before. You think of, like, The Rock, and you think of, like, John Cena. They have millions of followers, and then, like, but then there's the rest of us, and, like, for most people that have their own private Instagram account, they might have a couple hundred people that follow them that they actually know. It's a whole different thing when people, like, start connecting with your stories. So, I mean, regardless if you got a couple hundred people or a few thousand or millions or whatever, like, it's just, it's crazy to wrap your mind around sometimes.
Yeah, it really is. And so my only real life encounter, kind of, so it wasn't, they didn't actually encounter. So I was one day, so it was a couple months ago, and the spring happened, and I had to go get my oil changed. So the car dealership is, like, about 2 miles from my house. So we dropped the car off, came back, and then we were cleaning out our garage, but it was a Saturday. It was nice. Everyone thought we were having a yard sale. So we both couldn't leave again. And so my wife stayed here, and then I just walked to get my car. And as I'm walking, I'm, like, doing an Instagram live, because I'm like, why not?
Yeah.
At that point.
Yeah.
And so I'm doing the live, and then as I'm doing the live, I get this notification, and it's somebody comments on my most recent post and says, did I just see you walking on Security Boulevard? That's the road that the car dealership's on. And I'm like, what is this? like, is this real life? Because I just didn't even, like, that just floored me, right? Because I'm like, I don't know if I didn't know anybody. Like, I knew one person that lived kind of close to me. That's it. Like, the rest were at least an hour away. So it was just one of those things that was just one of those moments where you're like, not quite like yours, because you got called out in the grocery store, right?
Yeah.
But it's still kind of, like, surreal. That's all it is. It's just a surreal moment.
Yeah, because it takes this, like, because before that, everybody's just part of the app, right? Like, you talk to people, but in most cases, like, you're having quick conversations, you're commenting on posts and stuff, and then, like, you see these people in real life, and you realize that, oh my gosh, you know, they have, you know, their day-to-day lives, they have all the things that they're doing. And I mean, I know, you know, most of us have, I would say, have people that we're pretty close to in the online community. We know what's going on with them, and like, you know, but it's just, I think it's different when you actually get to see somebody in person. And I think that's why when people talk about doing meetups, and even if, whether you're doing a large meetup where you got a lot of people, or if you're just doing, like, a small group or whatever it is, I think that's really important, especially if you've spent the last year or so in your house and you haven't really had much one-on-one interaction, or, you know, small group interaction. I think it's important. So, you know, I think, one, it's a whole other thing when you see people in real life from Instagram or wherever, and two, you know, if you can get some things together where you actually do start to connect with people, I think it's a wonderful.
Actually, because I've met up with a few people recently. So I in January I met up with you know, Alex Poro. Yeah, and I met with him and Keto D down in we went to Key West. So we flew into Miami. So we went and got lunch with them. Yeah, and then you know, all former fat people all former very fat people getting food. What a shock. And And then earlier in May, I met up with Jarp's Journey and Drinking 400, and we met up in Philly, and then we wound up doing we also held like a 5K meetup later, which had a few more people show up, and it was just like a nice thing, right? Like we just walked around a track and like in South Jersey and just hung out and like talked like normal.
I see them on a track all the time.
Yeah. So this is not the same track.
Okay.
This was actually right in Camden, New Jersey. So it was one of the Camden County. So one of the most dangerous counties in the country.
Yeah.
But yeah. So we went with that because we're like, you know, he does it up in New York, we'll do it in Philly. We got a couple people to come out, and it was a good time. And it was just like we just talked like, and some of us had like just instant like because we knew each other somewhat, right? So it's like you like kind of like an old friend that you haven't seen is what I equated it to, and then you just like kind of pick up because you know a lot about each other's stories. You don't know in-depth personal things, but you know a good amount that you can just talk about things, right?
And that's what's cool when you actually do have, because we had a meetup back in 2019 around down here in Cincinnati. They have the Flying Pig race, and we got some people together, and we got to have one of these meetups. And that was kind of the thing. Like, we know you from what you post on social media and your story around that, and then it was kind of cool getting to sit down and talk to people and have them fill in some of the details of the other stuff. So, but yeah, man, and I think anytime that that you can meet up with other people, I think you definitely try to do it.
Yeah. It's something that I 2020 did a number on that, and 2021 started to, but now it seems to be turning around. So hopefully there's more opportunities for those kind of things. Of course, I won't have the time. So
no. You're going to be very busy. You're going to be sleep deprived. Yeah. But you're still going to have podcast episodes come out.
So I got plenty set up. Yes. Okay, so kind of switching gears here a little bit. I like to ask each guest because I like to get to know more about the guest than just whatever, like we talk about, like weight loss. A lot of it's weight loss, right? Or fitness or health things. So I like to ask like a hobby or an interest that's not weight loss related. So I was curious what yours might be.
Yeah. So I mean, I think there's the standard stuff, like there's a standard stuff you'll hear around development of like listening to books, reading books, watching some YouTube channels to kind of unwind and stuff. But like I find it interesting how we all kind of like, if we have a chance, we can gravitate towards stuff that we might have liked in childhood, in many cases. So two of those for me would be wrestling, which we've talked about, and the other one would be sports cards. And I think it's kind of interesting with the cards now are pretty popular. Like, they've come back. They've kind of lost a little bit of steam with all this NFT stuff going on. I'm still trying to figure out what's going on with that.
NFT is the weirdest thing ever, because I'm like you don't own the original, but you don't own, like, it's not like a physical tangible thing, right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And it's like, and if you listen to some people when they're talking about how this is actually going to go, like it's going to end up deregulating stuff, I'm just like, I can't. But the resurgence on sports cards, I think is really neat. Like when we're talking late 80s, early 90s, that was kind of like the big thing to do. And, favorite players at the time would have been King Griffey Jr. was one that I liked.
I actually, tangent real quick. When I was a kid, I lived in Seattle.
Okay.
Because my dad was in the Air Force, and Seattle was the first team that did how they do like that fan picture day where the fans can get like pictures of the players and stuff.
Yeah.
So Seattle did it the first time, and it was a mess because they didn't have it organized right.
Okay.
And the thing is people could get pictures with, and also like you could like shake hands and stuff like that.
That's cool.
So like Griffey and A-Rod, like I shook Griffey's hand and I fist bumped A-Rod. Yeah. But I just thought I'd throw that in there since you mentioned Griffey.
Well, I mean, that was like, at that time.
This was like 95, 96 time frame.
Well, that was, So that was, 95 was when Junior broke his wrist, came back, and then they had the playoff run.
Refused to lose.
Yeah. And then that was, dude, that last, I still can't believe the Angels fell apart like they did. That was insane. But then like the next year is when A-Rod just went crazy. Like he went from just like, I mean, that was a really that was a cool time. That was around the time that I was doing a lot of the collecting, and I wound up actually getting some cards from like the 50s through the like 70s and 80s. You know, I picked up a collection when I was, you know, like when I first got out of college. Like basically, I went to one of these hobby shops, and the guy said somebody like sold brought all their cards in, and those cards themselves, they weren't in the best of condition. I think that's the thing now. I think things have to be in really, really good condition. But what they were just like things that, you know, because my dad was really into baseball, and he was really into kind of like, you know, within Cincinnati, like the Reds, it's a big tradition thing with them being like the first professional team and all that, and having the big red machine and all, and the team in 1990, I remember, which won the World Series too. You know, so like he was really into that. So I was seeing all of these rookie cards of like Reggie Jackson and who else was in there. I had a Nolan Ryan in the Mets uniform, which I thought was really cool. It wasn't his rookie card, but it was like that. And then, you know, for you're a Phillies fan, Mike Schmidt. So that was really cool.
That's awesome.
Mike Schmidt one, yeah. And I have a Pete Rose rookie card also.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So like that. So yeah, I mean, like that's probably something that I don't really collect them anymore. The only thing that I did do was like I got the price guide that we used to buy when we were kids is now online, and I have like a spreadsheet of the values of or supposed values of the cards that I have, just so I know. But that was a hobby. And then with the wrestling, I think a lot of stuff, and I've talked to people that get all kinds of fired up when they're talking on social media. We take cues from the wrestling promos. So Macho Man Randy Savage, like 1987, like going crazy, you know, talking about being in some far off dimension or whatever, just, you know, whatever. And The Rock, like just the delivery and stuff. I mean, you'll see people that are either celebrities now or social media influencers or just people in our circle.
Yeah.
You know, like channeling their inner Rock.
And not to mention DDP does have his yoga now that people do in the weight loss community, which is like completely crossing the streams.
Well, and it's the perfect demographic too, right? I mean, like we were growing up at that time. You have, and that's geared, originally that was geared mostly towards men when I first remember seeing the ads for it. But oh my gosh, yeah, you have all these wrestling fans. You know, he is getting them to do something that it used to be like very, you know, you stayed away from yoga as a guy. It wasn't macho, which is stupid because flexibility is something that you need. But but yeah, it's genius how he's put all that together. It's awesome the work that he's done with Jake the Snake and Scott Hall and everybody else. He's done so much.
It's amazing, and not to mention actually I heard all the like current wrestlers who use it too, because they're wrestling in like their 40s, and they do it just to stay limber, because like Chris Jericho, AJ Styles, because 40 isn't exactly as old as it used to be. And I find those guys, I love that, and I'm not going to pretend that I know nearly as much about the Japanese strong style and independence and all that, but I think it's so awesome that you no longer have to have these, you know, 6'5", 6'6" bodybuilder type guys, but you have like AJ Styles, you have like Daniel Bryan, you have, you know, all these guys, and you're right, they're Jericho's 50. He's 50
now. Yeah. So like, I mean, and still in tremendous shape, still able to do all of these things. I mean, I think that, you know, training has come a long way. That's in wrestling and in all areas. And, you know, what we're seeing now, you know, because I'm coming up on 40 doesn't look the same to me as what I thought it would be like growing up. Life's a little bit different.
Well, you know, when you're 10 and you talk about somebody being 25, and you're like, God, that's old.
Oh, dude, they were dead. Like, they had new life.
Yeah, I know. So today, because I knew we were going to talk about wrestling, I did prepare for something.
Okay.
I wore this.
Oh my goodness, he's Wolfpack.
Yeah.
Got something else too.
Yeah, I got.
We got.
Up here. All right, never mind. I got when I was in Cincinnati in 2019. I got like in this. It was like towards the end of the season, the Phillies were playing, and they had they had like the rings for like $10 or something, like like the replica ones, and I got one because I don't even know why, because I was just there, and I'm like, I'm never gonna be in Cincinnati again because I always get something from each stadium I go to.
Yeah.
I have like a whole collection of mini bats. That's usually what I get. But since I was there, I was like, oh, I can get the ring. That's better than a mini bat, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it
That's
was like the
awesome.
night. I think it was like the 75. Anyway, but yeah, wrestling. So I'm now what's called considered, I guess, a lapsed fan because since like 20, it was like WrestleMania 35 was when I pretty much stopped watching.
Yeah.
Right around there, and then because I went to WrestleMania 20 and 32, and I used to go to like 4 or 5 events a year for a while.
Yeah.
But it just like I started, I'm like, they're really like playing to the lowest common denominator. Like it's also because I've seen the same
Exactly.
like they recycle and rehash stuff from that worked 20 years ago.
Yeah. Well, and I don't watch. There's some of the YouTube channels I watch. Cultaholic, I like the way that they present stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So like if I want to keep up with what's going on currently, I will do that. Now I had the WWE Network, and we have Peacock, so I can go in and watch it. I don't like user experience on Peacock.
Peacock's awful.
I know. Yeah. Oh, it's.
I got Peacock to actually watch a show. Like I'm currently because my wife and I started watching the Mr. Mercedes show.
Okay. Yeah.
On Peacock, and I got it for that, but I got it right around WrestleMania, and I was like, oh, let me just like try it and see if I can. And I made it a little bit into WrestleMania. I'm like, I don't care. Like which is bad because like I have all this stuff like that I've collected over years of wrestling. I'm in my man cave. I know there's a picture. This is
see it, man. You got all the stuff there.
But like I have like all kinds of stuff, and I still have it, but I'm not into it anymore. Like it doesn't.
Yeah.
But I can watch the nostalgic stuff.
That's pretty much what I was doing. Because like I would go through and watch a lot of I know people don't like the invasion angle. The angle itself, but like some of the pay-per-views and some of the matches there I thought were really cool. And the way that the network was set up, you could just basically put a pay-per-view on, skip around on the matches, and watch the stuff that you wanted to watch. That I like. Watching the stuff now, and because I knew when you and I were kind of talking about this earlier, there's just too much. Like 7 hours for a show? No.
Yeah. WrestleMania 32, when it was that show was a mess. When we got there, they had problems getting people in the stadium. So if you watch WrestleMania 32, if you go back and watch on the network and watch the pre-show stuff, you'll see the stadium is very empty for most of the pre-show because we couldn't get in the building. Like we were outside, we were in line for almost 2 hours. Now this is me at 600 pounds in line for 2 hours. It was not good. And then, and we had good seats. Like we were sitting, like we were right with the ring. Like, so we were dead center. We were opposite the hard cam.
Okay.
And we were like, we were up, like we were in the first raised area, but like not the bowl, but like down further. Cause they had to create all these extra seats in the stadium. And it was just like perfect seats. Like we could see everything, but we got there as the first official match of the WrestleMania was starting. Like we got to our seats like 3 minutes after 6, which was 7 Eastern.
Yeah.
And I was so mad. And so I wound up emailing WWE and complained because I was like, I like, this is BS because like we pay all this money to come to WrestleMania and then it's like a nightmare. And they comped us tickets to another show in our area. And I want to be in like Extreme Rules in 2017. We went to like 4, and I got 4 tickets, and we only had 2 for Mania. And I was like, that's fine with me. Thank you very much.
Yeah, seriously.
But yeah. So one of the things that I was grabbing while you were talking. So one of the things I have is this. So I have this thing, right? Replica Belt.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Can you see that? Yeah.
Very nice.
So, and it's signed by that's Shawn Michaels.
That's cool.
I hate this virtual background. This is why.
Yeah.
But so it's signed by Shawn Michaels and one other person here. It's easier. Signed by Ric Flair.
Oh, that's awesome too.
And I mean, I met both in person when I got it signed, so it wasn't just like I bought it. But yeah, so it's and that's like one of the things I keep on my bookshelf, like the shelf right above the one you see is my Winged Eagle signed belt because it's like one of my prized wrestling possessions. It's signed, right? Yeah. And it's and when I look at it, like I don't think, oh, wrestling sucks now. I think I really loved it when I was a kid, when I was like 14, 15. Like
Exactly.
it was just so, I mean, I remember going to school. So I graduated in 2002. So I'm a couple years younger than you, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But you know, I remember like scenes like when Stone Cold had the gun on McMahon.
Yeah.
Like you thought that was real. Like cuz you like, I mean, even though you know wrestling is fake, as
Yeah.
which I know Jarps is going to get on my shit cuz I said it was fake. But but you know,
Scripted. Scripted. It's
yeah, yeah,
scripted.
yeah,
Yeah.
scripted.
Very real. It's scripted.
But you know, it was just like you felt it. Like it felt like he was actually going to shoot him. And then
Yeah.
you get the comic relief of the Bang 316.
Well,
Or
and that was after the Brian Pillman angle where
yeah.
you really, I mean, that actually Pillman's house was same county as what I live in, probably about 10 minutes away.
Oh wow.
And like, but yeah, apparently they had a lot of calls. Like we literally just witnessed a murder. And if you watch it now, I mean,
Oh yeah.
it does look. I mean, it's amazing that I mean, clearly the networks had no idea what they
Yeah. Well,
were.
yeah.
Yeah,
It's amazing because it was such a different time, because like now you
yeah.
can never get close to the stuff they pulled. I mean, even just saying like Godfather with his being a pimp with hose.
One thing, and this was my only run in with a no, actually no, I'll tell you I'll tell you the main one, and then I'll tell you the second one because it's just short and funny. But like they were having a meet and greet with The Rock at the mall, and this was this was towards the end of Nation of Domination. This is right before they were going to make the big like Survivor Series World Championship run with it.
Oh yeah.
And I was, for whatever reason, mall closes at 9. I think I was actually nervous about medium, I think is what this was. So like I got there like 5 minutes before. He's sitting there, like they're packing things up, and he was just like, he was so like laid back and down to earth. He's like, he's like, brother, like come over here. And like I talked to him for like a couple minutes, and like it was so cool because you see what he is now, and you've always seen kind of how he's presented himself publicly. And what do we all think about people that are celebrities? Like, man, I hope they're kind of like that in real life. He was very much
That's
down
awesome.
to earth. Yeah, and so that was one. The other one was I worked at this retail store while I was 16. This would have been like, yes, this would have been 98. This was WCW height of WCW.
Oh yeah.
And so like I'm putting stuff, like I'm getting stuff to take back to my department from the front counter, like putting stuff back. I turn around and I see Scott Steiner, like, and it was when he was Big Papa Plum, had the bleach blonde hair, the dark goatee, and just like this massive guy. And like the three of us that were working there as wrestling fans, like we couldn't believe it. Yeah. And he's like, it's so funny because you're like, you're Scott Steiner. He's like, no, I'm not. And I mean, it's like, come on, like seriously, like, who else would look like that?
Yeah.
I will never forget that. Like I literally turned around and he was right there. Yeah. So those were my two run-ins, I guess.
So I had a run-in. This is not wrestling, but it was very similar to your Scott Steiner story.
Yeah.
I used to work in movie theater, and when I was a teenager, I guess this is 2002, 2001. So Zoolander came out, and this woman comes up to the register, and she's like Anne Hathaway, right? So I'm like, so I'm at the register, I'm at the box office, and I say, "Are you Anne Hathaway?" And she says, "No." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And she asked for a ticket to Zoolander, and I mean, Princess Diaries is currently in the theater too. Like, so I'm like, I'm not that off.
Yeah.
And then she hands me her credit card to pay, and what's the credit card say? Anne Hathaway. And she just goes, when she hands me a credit card, she goes like this. and I was just like, huh. And we like taped that receipt, like on, like we made a copy of it and taped it on, because it like on in our office, because it was just like, when are you gonna see it? When you I saw a couple there, like I saw like Alan Jackson, and I actually got a picture with Alice Cooper.
Yeah.
And like that's the one time I asked this, like that was one of those weird things. I'm like, you know what, I'm just gonna ask him. And I asked him for a picture, and he was like, I didn't really know him that well, because like before our, like he's kind of before our time, right?
Right.
A bit. So, but like when I asked him, because he went and he was there every Halloween, he did like a concert in my town.
Okay.
And he was there with his like kid, his daughter, and her friends. And his daughter and her friends went and saw The Grudge 2 or something, and he went and saw some Robin Williams movie by himself. And so I knew when it was getting out because I was a projectionist too. And so when it was getting out, I ran down there and got him, and we had a disposable camera because it was 2006.
What we did back then.
Yeah. And so I asked him if we could get a picture, and he's like, yeah, sure. And he's like, how much longer till that other movie gets out? I'm like, oh, probably 25 minutes. He just hung around and talked to us for like 20 minutes.
That's
just
awesome.
Asked, like, he asked, like, are you guys in school? You know, what are you doing? He's like, and then one guy was like, yeah, he's like, I'm not really in school right now. He's like, well, you need to get your ass back in school. and it was just one of those cool, like, weird, because he didn't have makeup on, right? It's just like a regular guy. And it was a really cool thing. But now my wrestling ones, so I obviously met Shawn Michaels when I met him in like 2004. Like, right, he was in my town like the weekend, and that weekend was the Royal Rumble in Philly. But that Friday before, he was in my town, which was like an hour outside of Philly.
Okay.
And he was like dropping the puck at the hockey game, and they had like this long like autograph signing. And when I met him, I was kind of like, I had one of those starstruck moments. Like, I didn't know what to say.
I'm sure.
Like, ever since I was a kid, like, it was him and Sting were my favorites. I don't know why.
Yeah.
And Surfer Sting more than Crow. But little kid, Surfer Sting was always favorite, right?
Yeah.
I was not a Hulkamaniac, but
understand that too.
So I met him. I had no idea what to say. Like, I just like said, I can't wait to see you on Sunday. Like, and then I asked him if I could get a picture with him, because like, it wasn't like necessarily you get a picture with him. He's like, yeah, I don't care as long as they're cool with it. Like, the people that were running it, and they didn't say anything, so got a picture, and I still have it. Like, it's like one of the only pictures I have with somebody famous, right?
Yeah.
And then about 4 or 5 years ago, I met Ric Flair at an autograph signing as well, and it was here in Maryland, and it was like, and I got there early, so I didn't have to wait in line as long. I got him to sign 2 of my belts and all that. And I don't know if it was a bad time for him, but he was the opposite of The Rock, of your experience with The Rock. He was very like moody. He seemed moody, and he didn't really he didn't want to really be there and all that. And it just was like, it was one of those like, don't meet your heroes kind of things for me. Because it just was like I paid because like to get the autographs, you had to pay like $100, right?
Yeah.
But I was like, I want Ric Flair's signature on my belt. Like, that's what I want.
Yeah.
And so I got it, but it was at the same time, it kind of like soured me on him a bit. It's not the same it's not the same. It wasn't the same person I see on TV. I see in interviews, all that.
Yeah. Well, and that's hard too. And then you see that documentary they did on him, and that was bored, man. I mean, that was he was he's definitely going through some stuff. But no, I get that, because that's the thing when you meet somebody that's famous, like, you just you want them to be like you think they're going to be, and when they're not, it can it can sting a little bit.
Yeah, and he also probably flew in from Atlanta that day, like on a flight, and was probably flying out like that night or early the next morning. So I get that it's different life than all of us lead.
Yeah,
but yeah, so awesome. This was fun. I like talking. I can always talk wrestling because it was such a like staple of teenage years, college, all that.
Yeah.
All right. So to kind of before we get to the Brett's Corner where I ask 5 questions, I kind of wanted to give you a chance to talk about your website and the stuff you do there, because give you some plug time before we get to the end.
I think what I'll do, and like I try to make this as because there's a lot of stuff tied to me, but there's the link that's in my Instagram profile, which I think it's yourlevelfitness.com. You know what? I can get this correct. Let me, because I've talked about this before, and if I'm going to talk about it, I should get it right. yourlevelfitness.com/IG-links. And if you go there, you're going to have, you'll have links to info on coaching. You'll have there's a link to like the podcast that I do, the fitness, for the Daryl Perry podcast, the Your Level Fitness podcast, which was basically an interview series. And I think there's like 40 or 50 some odd episodes on that. And then there's the non-fitness related one that is the When It Clicks podcast. That's linked up there as well. And then the merch is there, and there's actually a framework. So if you're like the stuff that you hear from me and you're going to check out the podcast, but you want to do this stuff on your own, the framework that's linked up is basically how to set goals and how to really be specific with those. And then, looking at your progress update is more or less data points, how to do that, like with your waist measurement and getting on the scale and progress photos and things like that. So that's going to be the best place for any and all things when it comes to me. And then, anybody that's listening, if we're not connected on Instagram, let's get connected. And I'm always happy to answer any kind of fitness related or podcast related questions as well. So
awesome. Definitely check it out. All right. So Brett's Corner, which was, I always say this, it was going to be the name of the podcast, but I decided not to use that. So, because one of my friends from work always told me I should have a podcast because we would talk about random stuff. And he's like, you know way too much stuff not to have your own podcast, like random things like movies and whatever. So anyway, question number 1 is, what movie, TV show, or event are you most excited for in the coming year?
I think they're finally putting together the Star Wars Kenobi thing.
Yeah.
I think they're finally doing that. I'm excited about that. I've wanted to see Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan Kenobi ever since episode 3 came out. So that's been what, 16 years? Good Lord.
Yeah, 16 years ago
at this point.
Yep.
So yeah, I'm excited for that.
Awesome. Yeah, I was excited for it when, I don't know if you do much collecting of like any other collectibles for Star Wars, but a couple years ago they had this one statue called the Mythos statue. It's an Obi-Wan Mythos statue. And it's basically like an aged Ewan McGregor / Alec Guinness hybrid.
Makes sense.
You're kind of like 10 years after Revenge of the Sith, but 10 years before New Hope or whatever the timeline is of that.
Smart
and it's like him. He's holding both lightsabers.
Oh, that's cool.
And like you have to look it up. It's a Obi-Wan Mythos. They're on eBay. They cost like $400 when they're made. Now they go for like $1,500 or $2,000. But like I it's kind of like it's one of my, not holy grail, but it's kind of like a holy grail item for me. Like I've always wanted it.
Are you a big Star Wars guy too?
Oh, I am. Yeah. I was before the last movie. That really brought me down a lot.
I gotcha. Well, what about the expanded universe? Even though it's not canon, are you into any of that stuff?
A little bit. I read some of it when I was a kid, like teenager and all that. But or like even
I really should get to the direct question. What's your thoughts on Knights of the Old Republic?
I like it. I mean,
I love that. I loved they had a book on Revan, which I did not like. But
I mean, you got to go with Thrawn, right?
I do like Thrawn.
Thrawn
is a good series. Yeah.
And I do like a lot of the newer novels. I really liked Lost Stars and the Bloodline one that was focused on Leia. I don't know if you've read or listened to any of these.
Well, Lost Stars. I didn't. That one I think was actually a young adult book.
Yeah,
but I really enjoy. Like I picked it up because at the time we hadn't had any like new Star Wars material to read, and like I got that, and I liked that. I did read the one on Leia, I believe, and then but before that, like right before that came out, I basically binge read the Fate of the Jedi series, which was 8 or 9 books, and I think I read that in about 6 months. But some of them, it's like any of those novels, right? Like some of them were really, really good. Others you're kind of like, eh.
Yeah. I mean, Chewie gets taken out by a moon, so.
Oh my gosh, yeah. We're that will be a whole nother podcast episode if we start talking about all the expanded universe stuff.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm a big Star Wars. I actually have a Darth Vader lightsaber over in the corner.
Awesome.
That I got a couple months ago. But yeah, I couldn't escape it once I got into it as a kid, and then seeing the special editions in the theater. And I mean, I know people hate the special edition, but when you're our age and you didn't get to see Star Wars in its first run, like that's what you had.
Yeah. No, I mean that's what you saw, and then you had the prequels, which I don't have the disdain for the prequels that a lot of people do. I think they are what they are.
Yeah.
But yeah,
they've grown on me. If that's I mean, Attack of the Clones is still terrible other than the ending. Like that whole movie
that Geonosis battles. Oh yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Other than that movie is awful. But but yeah, I mean, it does grow on you, because especially because it is what it is. Like, you can't change it, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Maybe I'll get there one day with Rise of Skywalker, but I really doubt it.
I don't think you have to. I think you're good without that.
Yeah, I am. It ended with the one before that. Okay, so number 2, what are 2 non-health related goals you have for the next year?
Probably just to make sure that I'm in the best possible headspace that I can be in, that I am focusing on what's in front of me in addition to having these big massive goals. Because like if you would have asked me this question a year ago, when I was doing the interview podcast, I probably would have tied like a certain number of episodes and said I would want to have this much done. And what I've found out is that I've never completely burnt out of doing all the stuff that I do, but I have come pretty close a couple times over the last year, and I'm trying to pace myself. And I mentioned the whole thing of like when I started talking about CP more, it brought out a lot of emotion.
Mm-hmm.
I found that there's some kind of deep rooted stuff that I'm just trying to work through. And so yeah, that's probably my main goal. And I know like with that stuff, and again, like just being present, we're talking about how being 40 years old is not like what we thought it would be. Time flies, man. I mean, you and I could have a catch-up show coming up on 60 and in 20 years or so, and we'll be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe the time flew.
Yeah.
So just trying to be present in the moment and just kind of working through some stuff and just make sure that I'm in the best headspace and such that I can be in.
Awesome. Yeah, it's so important, right?
Yeah.
Okay, question 3. This is kind of related to your coaching, I'm sure. If someone came to you saying they were lacking motivation to stay consistent, what 3 pieces of advice would you give them?
Look at what you've done to this point and be very specific. Tell me how many workouts you're doing a week. Tell me what your eating plan is. If you think you're not doing well with it, like tell me what you're not doing well with. And then let's look at the stuff that you're already doing and focus on that, and then see what the next step is. The other thing that I would do is that if you feel like you're starting and stopping, instead of following a plan, really start to figure out like what your preferences are. Because when we talk about sustainability and consistency, that comes back to your preferences. If you can do the things that if you can do that stuff consistently, or if you start with what you like, consistency becomes a lot easier. And if you start with that foundation, you're going to be able to stick with this for the long term. So, and that's what I would do. And I think if you take the action, the motivation is going to follow. So just those 3 things I think could be a huge help.
Awesome. I like it. All right. Number 4, what have you discovered over the time of your journey that has surprised you the most?
That what you learn through your weight loss journey or your weight loss process really does spill over into other areas of life, and that your journey is yours and nobody else is going to have one that's exactly like it. So you might as well enjoy it, because honestly, the real journey is a lifelong one where you're trying to figure out this stuff and figure out all the other things that you're trying to do.
Awesome. Last question. If in 150 years science fails to save us and all that is left is a book about your life, what would the title be, and what would the blurb tell us about Daryl?
The title would be, this is a good one. The title would be, I Figured It Out. And the blurb would be a story of just hanging in, evaluating, and adjusting.
Awesome. I like it. I love that question, because there's no wrong answer. There's no right answer. It's very subjective.
Yeah, I like it.
All All right, Daryl. Well, it was great having you on today. Where can people reach you if they want to find you out on the internet besides the website that you already plugged?
Sure, sure. So the best place, actually, probably just point you towards the podcast that I've been on. So go to Spotify or go to Apple and just put my name in. So it's Daryl Perry, so DARYL PERRY, and there'll be shows that I do, and there'll be a ton of episodes that I've been on. I think podcasting is wonderful because, again, you get to like get a sense for the person as you listen, as you guys have probably gotten through this episode as Brett and I have been talking. But yeah, that's what I would do. If you're not on the website, look in a podcast directory because I've got some stuff out there.
Awesome. And what's your Instagram handle one more time?
Instagram is @yourlevelfitness.
Awesome. All right. Thanks everyone for listening all the way to the end. You made it. Make sure you check out the show notes for links to anything we mentioned on the show. Be sure to check out my website, becomingbrett.com. You can follow me at Becoming Brett on Instagram and Twitter, and the show at Becoming More Pod on Instagram. Until next time, make sure you give us a 5-star review and come back next week to learn how we can all become more.